Venerable Kumbhela asked me to make a few announcements. First of all, please keep the door closed at all times, the door of this room, because monkeys can get in. And if you have them inside, it's very hard to get them out and very hard stopping them from, doing whatever they do. So right now they're extremely active. Yesterday apparently they took up with some shoes, but the people working here got them back. I heard something like they went out, they threw them into the nettles, so then while we were in session they all got them out again to save our shoes. And obviously everyone had their shoes, but some of them had disappeared. So there's nothing we can do about that, and so they're probably looking out. But the point is, please always keep the door closed. So when you leave, even if there's still someone inside, maybe just close it. Okay, there's that. Oh, and please do not bring cups to this place. Sorry, I'm not a good example. But I was asked, please do not bring cups. I don't know what are the exact reasons, but there's a policy not to bring cups because they disappear, I guess, etc. So if you can, just bring your water bottles and have your tea somewhere else. And then there's something. This is about... how can I explain this? Many of you know about this already. Maybe some of you don't know about it. But since once I've told you, you know about it, and then it's the time to be mindful. To give you an example, anything that you find precious, like you have a laptop or you have a phone that's really expensive, you never leave it on the ground, right? You don't leave it on the ground, you put it safely in a higher place. Right? Because it's dirty, it's dusty, so you don't want it to break, and you can see it, and so you put it in a high place. Now, with regard to any kind of material we use for the Dharma, we're also trying our best to keep it high up, to not put it on the floor. It's kind of like it keeps the respect for something, and actually Tibetans do it with any book. Like any book, anything that helps you to learn. So out of a sign of respect, they try to not just put it on the floor, put it on a certain place, especially when it comes to the Dharma, put it on a table, and then not put other things on top of it. Okay? So this is not easy. We don't have that culture. It's not part of our culture, and we keep forgetting. But I think it's a great opportunity to just practice it anyway. Okay? Out of respect also for Tibetan culture, because you have Tibetans around here who are familiar with this, so we are actually in a Tibetan community as such, because we're surrounded by Tibetans. For instance, where I teach, it's at the Institute of Buddhist Dialectics, I give some classes in English, and there the monks sometimes come in and I see people sitting on those tables where you put Dharma things on. So it's like you put your behind somewhere where you also put your books. All right. So there it's even more important. They see that and they think, "Wow, this is so bizarre, so disrespectful." So I kind of tell people just saying, "Look, even if you don't see it that way, that's a nice gesture. You respect their culture because it's offensive to them." But even here, to try and practice that, if there's something that contains Dharma, or anything that you consider to be precious, to kind of treat it with that respect, right? Like we treat, for instance, I don't know, in school, etc. If you have a teacher, for instance, in school who is very valuable to you, you treat them with a certain degree of respect, right? So it's all expressed in that. And they say, with this respect, you create the causes for better knowledge. If you're kind of like, whatever, right, and you're careless, you create the causes for not understanding things fully, because there needs to be something coming from your side. So it actually all kind of makes sense. Our mental attitude is responsible for how much we take with us from here. And so this kind of sense of respect is considered important, and let's just practice that. So apparently someone came in and saw books were all over, on the floor, on the cushions where we have our behind on. So to try to keep them on the table, to not put cups and stuff on top. Anyway, cups shouldn't be here, or water bottles on tops, but keeping them in a respectful way. Just as part of this practice. Okay? During those 11 days, if you choose to discontinue, of course, it's up to you, but So you get used to it after a while. Okay, so that I wanted to say. Also, someone made a comment, and I thought that was really actually quite important, and I do want to address this. It's a little bit difficult, that one. In this tradition, I mean, it's actually right, it's actually true. When we do the visualization, it's a male Buddha on the throne. The 17 male panditas, not a single woman. Right? And this person said that, and I thought, oh yeah, it's actually true, right? And I'm so used to it. This is a very, what is the word for it? A very patriarchal? Mm-hmm. Yes. Say that again? Patriarchal system. It's a very patriarchal system. So I'm used to it, you know. It's either that or nothing in my case. So when I started, it was even worse. It was even more so. Now women can study in the same way. When I first studied, it was only in the beginning. There's no title for women, etc. Things have really come along. But it's still there. It is still there. So traditionally, of course, it was like that in the West too. It was totally run by men. Most famous men in the past, most famous people in the past, they were men, not many women. And even in the scholastic department nowadays, I mean, I have a good friend, she's a professor at Emory University. She says, wow, there's so much discrimination still, like in the academic world, men still rule. It just is that way. And it frustrated me greatly in the beginning. It really frustrated me a lot. I thought it was painful. I was only with monks who were raised in a way, many of my monks classmates were raised in areas in Tibet where a woman would never sit higher than a man. So I had some of my classmates' sisters live with me as part of this situation. I told you with his nieces and then also some of his sisters, they shared a room with me for a while. And they told me that they, at home, when they sat higher than a man, their parents would say, sit lower. So that's how they were raised. For them, that was normal. They never questioned that. And also in Tibetan society, I remember initially when I came here and I spoke to some of the Western nuns, they didn't like feminism. They literally told me, we don't like all that talk about feminism. All these Westerners coming and putting our monks down. I was like, what? What kind of feminist did you mean? No, but as it turns out, you see, Tibetans are in a situation right now due to the political situation in Tibet. So the Chinese oppressing them, trying to destroy their culture and religion, etc. There's a very strong sense of being a Tibetan and trying to preserve this. And His Holiness fosters that. Now, being human beings, of course, we're never really good at keeping a full balance, and we may go into slight extremes. So any kind of criticism of Tibetans, they take it personally. They feel they're threatened. So if it's like, they didn't criticize the nuns. They said, these monks, they're putting you down. Right? If someone says that, look how the monks treat you. You shouldn't be treated like that. Any kind of that criticism, they don't see it as taking them, or they used to not see it like taking them out. They saw it as a criticism of another Tibetan. So they are Tibetan first and women second. So the women's right movement did not take off as well as you may have wanted because of this. And it took a few years, okay? And so I was aware of that, and when I said something, I tried to never mention the monks, but just say you can do it, anyone can do it, and so forth. And that was about it. I was kind of careful about it, because they didn't want to argue with me, and so if they didn't agree with me, they probably wouldn't tell me. Only very gently. So the point is that initially talking about women's rights with women didn't get you very far. But it's because of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and other lamas who, to me, these great lamas, they're the greatest feminists. I mean, many of them are really great. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I don't think he's one of the greatest feminists. He's always been saying, women should have the same right, women should do this, women should do. And now these women, right, the Tibetans listen to them, and now when you talk to a Tibetan woman, sometimes it sounds like they came up with feminism. So all this stuff like 10, 15 years ago, it's all gone. They're like, of course we can do the same, right? They don't say anything disrespectful towards the monk. There's still that respect. But they are definitely supportive of that. And to tell you the truth, as a nun, I was always supported by monks with my studies, right? They always said, children, you can do it, come on, right? They always supported me. Sometimes I got special treatment because there weren't that many nuns doing this, and I got things that my classmates didn't get. But the thing was, I felt everyone was up against me. I was really like, I sometimes my classmates were a little bit naughty, but not always. And it was really interesting dynamic that I went through. Initially, it was like they would say something, and I'd be like, right away aggressive. Like, what are you saying? Right? Are you saying women as inferior? And they're like, yes. Bring it on. Anything, any debate, right? And I really wore it. So the moment they noticed I was getting excited about it, they were like, okay. That's just their sense of humor, you know? So, and at some point I realized, it's really not so much about the topic as such. It's just when they notice. So I had a classmate who had a lot of anger. Whenever he got angry, they pounce on him. All right, are you angry now? How does it feel? And he had once thrown a tape recorder against the wall and broke it. And that was like, oh my God, he's getting angry. Save your tape recorders. That's what he was. Hold on to your tape recorders. So he started laughing before long. It was really funny. So I realized it was just their way of addressing anger in this way of kind of make half fun of it and kind of first kind of getting at you, at the anger, but then kind of turning it into a joke so that you could laugh about it yourself, right? Okay, that being the case, I figured if I told them women are inferior, they would go, no, 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 no. I tried that. You know, I'd say, yeah, you're right, women are inferior. Wait a minute. And then they would go and bring up these arguments why they're not. So they were really raised in that way. There was this cultural thing, of course, but there were also these monks that had been trained in logic, and it just doesn't make sense. Why would you say women are inferior, right? So then it actually didn't make sense. And so a lot of the times I felt very offensive. Sometimes I thought someone was humiliating me, and they weren't. And I never really knew when it was and it wasn't. So it was a real balancing act. There were sometimes like, I didn't mean it. What do you mean? And I was like, one day I kind of went up to one and I said like, oh, it's so difficult to be a woman. I'm so suffering, or something to that extent, right? And they were like, well, it's difficult to be a man. There's also a lot of suffering. I thought about it, I thought, yeah, well, okay, that's true. But also, and this is a little bit difficult, this is a little bit hard, okay, that part. But I did feel humiliated in cases. That was my experience. Now let's assume there's karma. And I'm just taking it from me personally. Let's assume there's karma. Maybe there isn't. Maybe it's just random, and right? So I thought along these lines. Okay, this is just me. I thought, all right, I feel humiliated as a woman. I feel I don't have the same opportunity. And sometimes I didn't. Some things my classmates could do, I couldn't do. Right? Like hang out really late and debate. That was not appropriate. You know, hanging out with these monks. I couldn't always debate in some of the monasteries in South India. Sometimes they asked me not to debate at night because they're only monks. I should do it during the day. So I was allowed to go to parts of the debate, but there were some restrictions. And the monks had to come to my room to debate with me, not out on the debate court. Anyway, so they weren't now they're actually stricter, to be honest with this. But what I'm trying to say is, now nuns can no longer debate at all. At that time I was at least allowed to do that, because thousands of monks with one nun. Anyway, that's just because of the celibacy thing. And of course they have nunneries now where the nuns can debate. But I had already quite a few restrictions at the time. And so I felt like, oh, this is so frustrating. Maybe I have a sex change or something. Right? I mean, I didn't feel like I felt very comfortable with being a woman. Always have felt. But it was just like, oh, this is so frustrating. And then I thought, well, if there really is karma, and if there's previous lives, I must have been a man at some point, right? I was probably a man in my last life. that helped me to not so strongly identify with being a woman. I was a woman, I was a man, I was a woman, I was a man, I was this, I was that. So this helped me a little bit to let go of this very strong sense, I'm a woman, I'm up against the rest of the world. It just kind of helped it a little bit. I was a guy sometimes, I was a woman sometimes, and guys have their problems, women have their problem, guys are sometimes suppressed by others. So of course what's happening with women, it's totally not appropriate and it should be changed, but my frustration, I was able to let go of that. It's not saying that this should be done that way, but the sense of frustration and anger and upsetness, that I was able to let go. And that was important. So I thought, okay, I just need to show them that I can do it like a man can. Without this kind of anger, yeah, you guys, which I did initially. But I then took it a little bit further. Now this is just me. I thought, if I have these experiences of feeling humiliated, that's an experience for me. That's true for me. Okay? That is my karmic experience. An experience of a cause I created in the past. And suddenly I thought, maybe I was someone who put down women. Maybe I was someone in the past. I don't know. I'm just saying. Just being careful here. Being very careful. In a previous life, I thought maybe I was a monk. And I said, these nuns shouldn't study. These nuns shouldn't be studying. I somehow felt I was a fat monk. In my mind, I had this picture of like being this obese monk. I don't like women. Right? Okay, somehow, because there is this thing with monks, and I've heard nuns say that, if you can balance your hormones and all this well, okay, then great. But sometimes monks, their hormones and their sexual desires and so forth, they can be so overpowering, they can only deal with it through disliking women. It happens sometimes. It's kind of like, it's not a balance, it's totally wrong, but they want to remain monks, they want to do this, but then physically it's very difficult for them because of hormones, etc. So therefore, they're kind of have this tendency to stay away from women, and it creates this divide. You don't find that with lamas, because they're usually highly realized, spiritually really evolved. They come across, they're complete, like they have both aspects, male and female, which is why I often think of a lama who's a man as like a mother, having this very motherly, because they're more bringing out this female side. And I noticed that because I'm not used to it for men having that. Like as soon as the Dalai Lama, it's got that really this softness, like a woman almost. But it's got both, this male and female. So with the high practitioners, it's complete. But with ordinary monks, it sometimes isn't. So if I experience this right now, it could be a result of what I've done in the past. And that liberated me. I was like, okay, I may have created the causes for that, and now I need to make sure I don't repeat these actions in any way by putting down anyone else. That could have been a cause. And it helped me. I was not some paralyzed victim in a sense. Surely, of course, conventionally I was a victim, but there were also causes in the past. Now this is very dangerous to say. To say, I'm not saying an oppressed person is their karma. I'm not saying that. I'm saying in my case, that I believe I created the causes for that to happen, and therefore this is what happened. But that doesn't mean I don't try to make changes. Okay? This is still not acceptable, but the sense of frustration and anger, that I was able to let go. Do you see how this is like, just that anger, that frustration, that, these horrible monks. I thought, okay, it's just an expression of my karma. And you know what was so interesting? That a lot of the humiliation, that I thought it was humiliation, when I talked to my classmates, they said, but we never meant to do that. You misunderstood. I couldn't talk to you in that moment because, I was in that blah, blah, blah. So a lot of what I experienced, it was true for me, but it was actually not there for the monks, so, from the side of the monks, because I cleared it up later. I said, you did such and such. And they're like, well, I did that to everyone else. I'm sorry, but I didn't mean it. So in that sense, it was really liberating. It was really liberating. It was very liberating, honestly. So things have changed a lot, and it's important that they do. I'm all for men and women having the same rights. For instance, what's still not the case is that women can have certain ranks. Personally, I don't have a problem with that, because I don't like to be in a situation having a rank, because that comes with certain responsibilities, things that I really don't like to do. You know, like in Tibetan society, you have these kind of ranks where you have to go to celebrations and inaugurations all the time. And it's like, don't give me a rank. I don't want any of that. I have a lot of freedom with what I do. I want that freedom. I don't want any of those hierarchical titles, because if you have one of those titles, the only thing you have more is more responsibilities, and more people ask you to do things and you have to do them. So I'm just pathetically lazy. So therefore I'm quite glad that I don't need to get a rank. If another nun wants it, I'll fight for it, but not for myself. So other than that, my life is not that different from a monk. And sometimes I am expected to walk behind a monk. In certain ceremonies, I sit behind monks. But actually, it doesn't harm me. If I sit there behind or I sit in the front, my ego, that one may be a little bit. But that's in the way anyway. So, I mean, I'm just saying for me personally. If it's for other women, sometimes His Holiness, in certain occasions, he said, nuns there, monks there. And I'm always happy when I hear that. But I usually sit in a different section anyway, because I do translation, and that means we sit separately. But I do remember times, and also now, I mean, upstairs, the nuns are usually in the Kala Chakra place. It used to be very much like that. And then the monks are in the temple where His Holiness is. So at least they don't have to sit behind the monks. They're next to the monks, right? Okay. So, therefore, whenever I feel someone is putting me down, I'm checking, is my ego involved? And because it usually is, I go, good opportunity to watch my ego. So it's not such a big deal. It's no longer a big deal. It used to be, it no longer is. And I found my place. I feel happy with who I am. I'm happy to be a woman. I don't want to be a man. There are advantages and disadvantages. Really, they're great. I tell you one disadvantage. Now, this is between us. It's much easier for a nun to keep the vows. Because somehow, some women have crushes on monks. But no men have crushes on nuns. So I know this situation of like Western monks are like being stalked by, someone. Sometimes in some Western centers, I don't know, it just happens. There are more female practitioners, more female, and somehow because of the unavailability, there's a bit of a, what's it called? What do you call it? Tempting. More tempting. It's the temptation is greater. Yeah, that's it. Right? So I hear these things, like some of the high lamas. I mean, His Holiness the Karmapa, when he was down at Yudo, he had these women sitting there all day long. Literally, I'm not exaggerating. Sitting down and looking up and going, oh, look at these women sitting there looking in your room all the time. Oh my God, can you imagine? I mean, this was bizarre. It doesn't happen the other way around. So there are really some advantages. There are some advantages. So you feel much more protected. No hair? Great. But for men it's different. So what I'm trying to say, it is harder in that way. I know monks, I know personally of a great geshe, very attractive, and women in the West tried very hard. They would come in the evening and like, And he, now he's no longer a monk. One of them he got married to. It's never happened to me. It never happened to me, right? That someone stalk me and come in the middle of, no, it never. So I'm okay, I'm fine. So this is an advantage. And a lot of men, they have this, I'm sorry, I'm talking about that, but a lot of men have this midlife crisis. So they give up their robes when they're 50 or 60. This hardly ever happens for women. They get divorced, they find a younger wife, right? Or something, right? It happens less to women. So once you're past a certain age, you remain a nun. And I'm not saying you have to remain a nun. If you don't want to be a nun, of course you give it back. But if it's hormone driven, if it's driven by something else, and then you can't help it any longer, and suddenly you're no longer a nun, and you feel like, what did I do? Right? You really regret that. That's painful. I've met nuns or monks who really deeply regretted giving it up. Okay? And they look at other monks and nuns and they cannot bear it because they would like to be, but they've given it up, or they've broken their vows even. And this happens more with men at a certain age. So all I'm trying to say, it seems there are a lot more advantages to being a man. It is in many cases, but I can also certainly give you a lot of advantages of being a woman. Okay? And I had to recognize that, and now I'm deeply comfortable with that. And honestly, there are situations when I know a monk doesn't talk to me. He would if we are just him and me, but if there are 3 other monks, he doesn't look at me. It happens. Hardly ever, but it does. And it bothers me again. It's still there. But then I need to remind myself, come on, he doesn't talk to you. So what? Even if he did, so what? So it's like my ego is hurt. It gives me the chance to check, where's that ego? Which ego is hurt? My feelings are hurt. Which feeling is hurt? Okay. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is, it's got its good sides and bad sides. It's pretty much advantages and disadvantages. So, and when the comment came about the 17 Panditas, I said, well, just think of them as female. Because in the end, these are great masters. They manifest as male, because at that time, it was much more beneficial. But you can think of them as women. Right? Avalokiteshvara, the Buddha of compassion. I cannot stop thinking of him as a woman.
Me too. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I do.
I remember asking a teacher, are you sure? Are you sure
Yes.
is female? I was totally convinced.
Looks very female.
Yeah.
Yes. Also here, yes, this aspect of Avalokiteshvara.
Yeah.
Vatisangbo, called Vatisangbo. It's a woman. That is a woman to me. It's a man, but actually to me it's a woman. So it's fine. I relate to her. Okay, great.
In ancient India, there was the perfect human being was an Ardhanarishwar, half man, half woman.
There you go. And that is true in Tantra too. You know, you work with the energies, and you work with both male and female energies. So culturally, we usually as women suppress more our male energy and cultivate our female, and vice versa. But with great practitioners, and I said that to the person who commented, great practitioners, when they are male, they come across as more female, because suddenly we notice that side more, versus women who are great practitioners, they're much more like men. There's one female Rinpoche, and I haven't met her personally, but people say she's like a guy. She's not like a guy. She's complete. She's brought to completion her male and female energy. But since we're so used to relating to a woman as like being the soft and da-da-da-da, and since there's more of the female of the male energy, I guess that's what we notice more. Right? Anyway, this was just on male and female. It doesn't concern all of you, but a lot of people are put off by Tibetan Buddhism because of that. But then you can't go to an academic university in the West. You should be put off by that. So the thing is, certain things we don't notice in the West. We don't notice in the West because we're used to them. We notice them here because we're not used to them. Tibetans don't know what I'm talking about sometimes. What suppression? I have no idea what I'm talking about. So there are certain degrees that happen in all cultures, and if you're used to it, we just don't notice. Okay? But that doesn't mean it's okay. I'm just talking about dealing with frustration. Right? That's most important. Anger and resentment don't work. Right? Okay, anyway, sorry. That was a little bit more extensive than I intended. But I like to share that because it's usually not addressed. Okay, great. Now let's go back to this. Oh, I did do a little bit of research on what Bao talked about this. It's called Capgras. Capgras syndrome. And it's Capgras. That was a French psychiatrist. His name was Joseph Capgras. So in 1923, he discovered this kind of syndrome. It's like a delusional something syndrome, a type of delusional syndrome, where, yes, when you see a person, you no longer you don't perceive. I need to look at my notes. I don't remember everything. You're no longer able to recognize them as that person. Okay, so I didn't do much research. I didn't have much time, but this is, by the way, where I put my bag here, up here, because it's got dharma books in it, to not put it on the floor. I did yesterday put it on the floor, to be honest. Because it felt awkward to have it right next to me. All right, but just to tell you about it, because it's very interesting. It takes us to something, thinking about it again. Okay, it's called Capra Syndrome, named after a French psychiatrist. And it's also a type of delusional misidentification syndrome. Okay. Everything we talked about it before, as in, like, you no longer recognize the person. There's some case studies that are mentioned, not that important. This is from Medical Today, one website, and also from Wikipedia. The exact causes are difficult to know. Lesions on the brain can be responsible. Dementia is definitely a great factor. Thyroid, like a hypothyroidism, that can be, like an underactive thyroid gland, that can be a cause. Lesions to the brain, definitely. So those are the exact causes, but it could also mean, that could lead to a disconnect between the visual part of the brain and the area that processes facial familiarity. So as I said, it could lead to a disconnect that connects the sense consciousness to the mental consciousness. Right? Usually it's like sense consciousness gives rise to mental consciousness, and right away you reflect on that person. As in, like, you see them, and then there's the mental process, oh, this is this is that, and so forth. But if that's gone, if there's not that mental response that you usually would have, with another mind you may think that cannot be my person, my person, my friend, my mother, etc. It's more common in women than in men, but it can occur in both. And the other part, I found another article, but it was just when the gong went off, I didn't have time to read it in great detail. And that makes total sense to me. That makes total sense. That it's not to do so much with the connection, but with the feeling that arises when you see a person. Now, this is really important. It's very difficult to understand, because the word feeling, the word emotion, very difficult to define. What are feelings? What are emotions? Okay. Now, in Buddhism, there is actually no word for emotion as such, but they do exist. And nowadays they do give a word to it. They didn't used to have a word. Like, this category didn't exist as such, although in meaning they did talk about emotions. So Tsonyung in Tibetan means emotion. That's a kind of newly coined word. But then there's also the word Tsoa. Tsoa means feeling. It means feeling. Now, what happens is, and this is here where we think an eye consciousness may not be able to do that. This is where we misunderstand an eye consciousness, believing it does a lot less than it actually can do. What is an important factor of an eye consciousness? It comes with a feeling. So when you see something, there's a feeling of pleasure, displeasure, or it's neutral. It is not a sophisticated feeling. I feel, like on a conceptual level, you have a lot more complicated or more sophisticated feelings. No, it's pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. So it's very difficult to put them into words, but it's just saying nothing complicated. I don't feel the feeling of being inadequate or all that. Nothing of that arises with an eye consciousness. An eye consciousness can't have those feelings. But it is definitely when you see, this is when you like something very, you like coffee, for instance. Like, you look at the coffee with your eye consciousness, you see the color and the shape of coffee. You know that you're looking at color and shape of coffee. Coffee, of course, is taste, but if you look at the color and shape of coffee, you see that, and you like coffee, it gives rise to a feeling of pleasure. Okay? First, you recognize the coffee, but then that gives rise to pleasure. So pleasure arises, even with the eye consciousness. Or if you don't like something, there's displeasure. So you see, this would account for the fact that this would also justify that our I consciousness can recognize something as being this, that, and the other, because there's a feeling there. Okay? So an I consciousness is much more than just a receptor. You have to think of it as slightly different. The I consciousness and the mental consciousness are not that different. We just differentiate between them because the I consciousness is limited in what it can perceive. And so when we talk about feeling here, it's just a pleasant feeling or an unpleasant feeling. Now, with regard to this Capgras thing, I'm not taking the questions because we talk about feelings more.
No, it's a clarification.
Clarification, okay.
Yeah. Would it be correct to say then that the nature of the feeling that the I consciousness can generate is of a primitive nature?
Yes, it's primitive as in like in comparison to the feeling that goes along with this conceptual mind. I think it's a more simpler kind of, it has less variety, let's put it that way.
Would it be borrowing as in like, don't you have to conceptualize whether you like or dislike something? So would it be borrowing?
You do it, that's what I said before. You initially, of course, do that conceptually. But our mental consciousness affects our sense perception. Now, a very simple example for that. When we were little children, when you had an I consciousness as a 1-year-old, of course we don't remember. But have you ever noticed when little children walk into a room and you give them a ball and they try to grasp it and they miss the ball? That seems to show that their 3-dimensional perception is not the same as in our case. We know to judge the distance between ourselves and a ball, and we can easily grab it. Also, when like a child walks through a room, they're much more likely to bump into things, right? So the sense of coordination. So I don't know, I may have read about it, I don't know how I'll come to this. It's not really something in the Buddhist texts, but I believe that we have not learned to see 3-dimensional when we initially, that ability from a previous life has gotten lost, this sophisticated way of looking at things, right? And why do I think this is the case? Because I read about a woman who was blind since birth, and then her blindness was removed. And then she could see, but she couldn't see. She hadn't learned to label the objects around her. So she was not able to, she talks about when she was driving on the road, there was this sign, and she thought the sign was coming towards her. She couldn't judge, she wasn't able to say, this is actually just going past, like we do. We're not threatened by signs at the side of the road because we know they're not going to hit us. But that inability to know, this is not coming towards me, this is moving towards me but moving past me. So we've learned that through labeling since we were little, to make sense of this room, to be able to see distances, judge shadows and so forth. So we've been able to do that, and it left parts in the brain, because our brain was so fresh, it registered with that, and so since that time we can do this. When you're at a certain age, you can no longer do that. If you haven't learned language since you were very little, you can't do it when you're older. Same is with this. So in this case of this woman who was blind, though she was quite young, she never really learned. She was still using her stick, etc., although she could see. So this, to me, it showed that although we believe when a person can see now, that they can see exactly what we see, should actually be the case, but that's not true. So what does that show us? That our mental consciousness plays a part in that. As children, we learn, we understand, okay, distance, and at some point, the visual cues, we can take them, and even the I consciousness can perceive things.
Sorry, this imprint which is in the
So the sense consciousness, the mental consciousness, that leaves an imprint which also affects the I consciousness.
So the imprint in the I consciousness is borrowed from the mental consciousness?
Not borrowed, they work together.
Okay.
So don't see them as like so separate. Don't see them as that separate. They work with one another. So the example that is in the scriptures, there's an example that they usually give. For instance, when you're really sad, like let's say someone you're very close to, and this person dies, and you're grieving. The taste of the food is not the same as usual. Things don't taste as good. So you still have the tongue consciousness, But your mental consciousness, which is, in the case of grieving, is very powerful, so it's more noticeable to us, because we don't grieve all the time. And then you notice the difference that through what is it called? The grief is a mental consciousness that affects your sense perception. Blue sky seems grey. Your favorite food seems bland, right? But then you take the other example. You're in love. And you come to Dharamsala in the rain. It's foggy and rainy. It drizzles. Or cats and dogs. Or it pours. Or whatever, right? A whole week. Sometimes it rains a whole week. But you couldn't be happier. You love the rain. It's pure. Right? So it's like when we're really, really super, super happy. I mean, it doesn't last, that's the problem, but we have these times. So this is an example of the mental consciousness affecting the sense consciousnesses. Oh, the sound of the rain. Right? Does that make sense? Does that make sense? So it's definitely, in those cases, we can definitely see there is a connection between mental consciousness versus sense consciousness. And then it's much more pronounced in the sense like words that we learn, concepts, etc. Now, this is my theory. This is my theory on this. But I've not seen it contradicted by anything in the scriptures. It's not really, they don't really talk so much about it. They say when you're angry, then you may see things in a certain way, etc. That you find. But based on that, I think we can go further. And then modern examples of people who've been blind since birth, etc., they count for that. And then it would make sense that if we know the concept of something, we can actually see it. So it influences our sense perception.
It's a clarification.
Yes. Yes.
So would we say then for the sense consciousness to have to perceive feelings and to apprehend as well, that we need first to have had mental consciousness that has accustomed itself to the certain object, and then on later occasions the sense consciousness can have this sort of apprehension, feeling, perception, whatever it is. But it can't be that so to say a sense consciousness that has not been accustomed to a certain object can experience feelings or apprehension.
It experiences a neutral feeling, for instance. If you don't know something you've never seen, we would say there's no feeling. Yeah. But by definition, that's a neutral feeling. So there be a feeling, but why would you have a pleasant feeling if you perceive something you've never seen before? Yeah. So there is an emotional kind of connect in the sense that you associate, you have some positive experience with that. Like children when they see their mom, right? So they over time, I mean, this bond needs to first be created, but at some point it's there. And the claim would be that with the eye consciousness, right away, there's this pleasant feeling coming along. So there's a recognition of this is mom and a pleasant feeling. And then, of course, giving rise to a conceptual mind, which then leads to a smile, etc.
But
that would account for that. And what I'm trying to say, before I forget, is the Capgras syndrome. There's one explanation where that feeling is not there. They talk about the feeling that you usually get when you see a person is not generated. That could be that because of the lesion in the brain, the dementia, etc. So usually you have an eye consciousness perceiving a person it comes along with a specific feeling of pleasure when you see that person. When that no longer arises, then you may conceptually think, well, there's something wrong here. I have no emotion, I don't have this kind of response, this response not emotional, but this feeling. And of course, this feeling that arises for the sense consciousness arises then for the conceptual mind. And even more pronounced. So the sense consciousness gives rise to a mental consciousness right away when you recognize the object. So, in that case, then, if that emotional response is not there, you're wondering whether that person is an imposter. But with the voice, it's there. The emotional response is there. Therefore, you don't believe this person is an imposter. To me, that makes perfect sense, just in answer to that question.
But if we, for example, see our father or whatever for the first time, or we see something for the first time, would we say that we see just shape and color with the eye sense?
That's what I said before. I don't think we just see shape and color.
Even when we see something for the first time.
Oh, sorry, for the first time, our father. Oh, sorry, okay. I don't know, not necessarily. If you're familiar with seeing the shape of a person and identify them as a person, you'll be able right away to say at least it's a person.
With the eye sense consciousness.
With the eye consciousness, to know that. But there is debate on that, and I don't know how to answer, because some of my teachers say this, some of them say that. But the more common explanation is that your eye consciousness can know Father, can know Father's body, basically. Yes, only clarification. Yes, Maya. Okay. Maya was first.
Yeah, I have a question regarding that, because I was thinking about it also when you were speaking before about. So, for instance, right,
those were not clarifications, but okay.
Because we also have, like, for instance, when you're using mantras or stuff like that, right? Or when we feel like,
Maya, can you wait a little bit?
For instance, yeah.
Sorry, Maya. Let's just keep with the clarification, if that's all right. We do it later, yeah? Wait a little bit. You be the first to ask, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, there'll be time for question and answers. Only clarifications. Clarification? Was that clarification you needed? You?
I can make it a clarification.
No. No. Try. Don't even try. Don't even try. Okay. Yes, clarification.
Ordinary beings can recognize these feelings in a sense consciousness, or only people who can slow down and actually see individual moments of mind?
I think the problem, can ordinary beings know them, recognize them? Well, we can't differentiate between the eye consciousness and the mental consciousness. So since we can't do that, I guess it's difficult to also identify the feelings. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Two.
Yeah, so we can stick to one, and then I can ask
okay.
One later. What you described with the rain and with being in love and how it affects the way we perceive the object. So wouldn't you say that the sense consciousness perceive the object in the same way, but then our mental state affect the way we see it? It comments on it, or
well, that's again the question. That's what we have. That's the same question again. That's the same as before. Does the sense consciousness just see the bare thing, and the mental consciousness interprets it, or does the mental consciousness, because of that, affect the sense consciousness, and the sense consciousness experiences that? Well, according to the mainstream explanation, the mental consciousness actually affects the sense consciousness. It is more than just a neutral receiver. Perceiver, sorry. It's more than just a neutral perceiver. It is not as sophisticated as, of course, a mind that can analyze, etc., but it can do a little bit more than just perceiving shape and color and always being neutral. So that there's a feeling of pleasure. That's 100%. 100%, it's very clear in the text, that it can be the feeling of pleasure. Well, where does that come from? Unless it comes from the mental consciousness. Because if not eaten a food before, right, seeing that food for the first time, or seeing the shape and color of that, it's not like, whoa, right? But the eye consciousness won't have that pleasant experience. But after you got familiar with it and you mentally know you really like that food, when you see its shape and color over there, then the eye consciousness experiences pleasure. Only because the mental consciousness affected it. So why do you struggle with the eye consciousness, with the mental consciousness affecting the sense consciousness? There seems to be a bit of a struggle with that. Right? I mean, because you keep asking about it, not you, like everyone, right? Having a bit of a... So my sense is that the reason you struggle is we have a sense the eye consciousness is totally neutral, as in like, can only perceive something and then that's it. But it can do a little bit more. It can recognize and it can have a pleasant, unpleasant or neutral feeling. Okay? Alright, okay, that's it. That's it. Sorry for cutting you short. No more clarifications. We'll have a little bit more time later. Okay? So allow me to leave it at that. Your questions will have no end, I know. And I want to address all of them, but maybe as part of this lesson it'll already be answered and we have time for question and answers. What time did we start? An hour ago. Yes, we did. Okay, we'll have a little bit more time with the break. Great. Okay. Let me just go a little bit further through this. Okay. So, taking the example of the eye consciousness, as I said before, there's the appearance of inherent existence. that is also an appearing object. So you perceive, the eye consciousness perceives the vase appears, the subtle particles appear, but also the vase appears as if it existed in and of itself, objectively. Okay? So, that intrinsic existence is the eye consciousness appearing object. Because whenever the vase appears to it, the vase appears to exist intrinsically. The eye consciousness is mistaken with regard to the eye consciousness appearing object because this appearing object, this intrinsic existence, does not exist. That is impossible. Okay? So therefore, it is mistaken with regard to that particular appearance, not with regard to the vase just appearing as a vase. That is not a mistaken appearance. But with regard to the vase seeming to exist in and of itself or independently. Another example for an awareness that is mistaken with regard to its appearing object, but incontrovertibly knows or realizes its object of engagement, is an eye consciousness apprehending the reflection of a face in a mirror. And here there is some disagreement. There's some disagreement. Some say an eye consciousness perceiving a face in a mirror is always mistaken, always wrong. As in, like, you always perceive, actively apprehend, the eye consciousness always apprehends the face to be, the reflection to be an actual face. Some people would say that, but I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure. I don't know. And I've discussed it with some of my teachers, and some agree, some disagree. There are different cases. First of all, you've all seen these cat videos, right? Little cat walks in front of a mirror and goes, meow. Definitely wrong consciousness. And I've seen it. My mom just had new little kittens, and they did it all. I kept, like, with a video camera, I was going to show to my teacher perception of a mirror, because the mirror is so important, but I never caught the cat doing it. But the point is, it's like this response. Or once I walked into a hotel in Delhi, and I walked towards this mirror that was covered with flowers around. And so I was walking toward it, and I thought, oh, there's a nun. It looked like it was just continuing on. So in that case, I was definitely not just, that was the mistaken appearance. Of course, it appeared to be a human being, all right, but I was fooled by it. So I think in that case, my eye consciousness was a wrong consciousness, misperceiving this image to be an actual person. So this may be an example, because there's a difference between just the image of the face appearing as a face, but us not believing in it because we know about mirrors, versus not knowing that. And so here the discussion is the eye consciousness merely mistaken but not wrong, or is it both? Okay? So anyway, I like to think that it is, because we automatically, there is a difference. We differentiate between things automatically appearing as something different and things only sometimes appearing as something different. Do you know what I'm saying? Sometimes a pen may appear as, I don't know, a cigar because of the light and so forth. Or a rope that is coiled may appear as being a snake. But that doesn't always happen. You need to have the right external condition for that to happen. But a mirror image of a person will always appear as that face. An optical illusion will always appear as that. Okay? An optical illusion, like when you see the tires of a car, when the car moves at a certain speed, it will always appear as if the tire moves backwards. And only when it slows down, suddenly the direction changes. Have you ever noticed? When it kind of slows down. So that is always there. And therefore, I would claim, through familiarity, and this is also true for inherent existence, things always appear inherently. Okay? So, therefore, we can perceive, it says in the scripture, we can perceive a table despite the appearance of inherent existence. We don't have to be wrong about the table itself, because we're so used to it. Because every time a table appears, it is inherently, so that allows us to still identify the table. But in some cases, if we're just occasionally wrong, for instance, if I perceive the ears of a rabbit to be horns, then I don't perceive the ears. I don't perceive the ears because those I believe them to be horns. But since if it always appeared that way, we would actually be able to identify both. Okay, we would be able to know this appears that way, but it's actually not, like with the mirror image. Okay, this is a little bit complicated. I'm sorry for confusing you with this. If you studied for a longer time, you know about what I'm talking about right now. But just whatever sense you got from what I said. So you can have mistaken appearances, and despite that mistake, still perceive the object. So the mirror image would be such an example, I'd say. So you have an appearance of that being your face, but you know it's not your face. Even the elephant knows that. I remember reading this article about an elephant. They painted the elephant's nose white, and so they put a mirror in front of the elephant, often enough, and at some point, what happened was they got the elephant used to mirrors. Animals get used to that as well. At some point, cats don't think there's another cat. Babies get used to it, animals get used to it. So they put a mirror in front of this elephant again and again, and one day they painted his trunk and painted it white. And the elephant touched the white part and kind of, after he saw it it saw it in the mirror, it started analyzing, like sniffing, what is this, right? Going like that. So because they recognized, this is my face. It's got something white there. And so they started to examine that. Which shows that although it appeared to be an elephant, but they still knew it was actually a reflection of themselves. Okay? So, therefore we can do that, animals can do it. And this is an example where we very easily are aware of the mistaken appearance. With inherent existence is different. Okay, so having explained all this. So we use the example of a mirror or optical illusions to get a sense of inherent existence. We can still function in this world even when there are optical illusions. If we know, in particular, we can function very well. And even if we don't know, we can function relatively well. With inherent existence, we can also function. But, depending on our grasping at inherent existence, that is with a mental consciousness, not just having the appearance, but believing it, that is a problem. Just the appearance wouldn't be a problem. If he only had the appearance, I don't think the Buddha would have taught all these techniques. There wouldn't have been the same urgency. The grasping is the problem because that gives rise to anger, that gives rise to attachment, and of course to all the problems we experience. Okay? I get a sense you guys are a little bit more tired than yesterday. Yes, you are. I told you it's going to happen. Okay, all right. Now, this eye consciousness is mistaken with regard to its appearing object because the reflection of the face in the mirror erroneously appears to be a face, while the reflection of the face in the mirror being a face does not exist. There's no face there, in that mirror. At the same time, the eye consciousness is able to correctly cognize its object of engagement, the reflection of the face in the mirror. There are different ways to categorize or divide mind. Some of the most important categories are correct and wrong consciousness. So I just mentioned it. A correct mind, a wrong mind. Sense and mental, conceptual, non-conceptual, valid, non-valid, mind, mental factors, coarse and subtle. Okay, different ways of dividing the mind. I've addressed most of them already. Okay. All right, now, correct and wrong consciousnesses. This category is from the point of view of the object of engagement. So you look at the object of engagement of an object. What is actively apprehended? What is held on to? In Tibetan, the word is really holding on to an object. Holding. The mind holds an object. You need to hold it for a few seconds. So however bad our concentration may be, but we can hold an object for some time, because if we don't hold it for some time, we cannot know it. Okay? If you move something past your eyes too fast, there is no time, even though it appears to the eye sense power, but the eye consciousness perceives it so quickly, there's no time for it to know. There's no time for it to hold, and therefore to actually know the object. Okay? So, therefore, the mind needs to hold the object. It needs to appear to the mind for some time, and then held in the sense that it gets apprehended or understood. Okay. An awareness, the object of engagement of which exists. So an awareness, the object of engagement, or it's actually easier to say the awareness whose object of engagement exists, just because whose is usually used for a person. I chose this awkward kind of way of saying it, but really it would be easier to say an awareness whose object of engagement exists is a correct consciousness. Right? The object is very simple. Horns of a ears of a rabbit being horns doesn't exist. Okay? What else? Flying cows don't exist. A pen that is a cigar doesn't exist. A rope that is a snake doesn't exist. So in actuality, the rope, to the mind, that rope is a snake. But a rope being a snake doesn't exist. Snakes, of course, exist. But when you misperceive a rope as being a snake, then, of course, it's the classic example, rope, snake. It's a very important example in Buddhist philosophy. But just using it in the way I just described. So, when that rope being a snake is a non-existent. So any mind that apprehends a rope being a snake, that is a wrong consciousness. A mind that perceives a snake is a correct consciousness. But here it's not a mind that perceives an actual snake. It's a mind that, due to the light, etc., to that mind, that rope appears as a snake, and that appearance the mind holds on to. Does that make sense? And here is again, if you're scared of snakes, you're more likely to perceive that rope as a snake than when you're not scared. Mental consciousness influencing sense perception. You're expecting there's a snake. There's a snake somewhere. So you're kind of seeing snakes everywhere. Right? Again, very powerful evidence.
Monkeys.
Or monkeys, yes. Or spiders. They get that big in the monsoon. I'm not good with spiders, so... Anyway, so, therefore, you misperceive something. Something appears in a mistaken way, and your mind is not aware. You're not aware that this is not the object, that you're just being fooled, that this is an optical illusion. No, the mind itself holds on to that appearance, and therefore has a non-existent as its main object. Rope being snake. There's no rope that is a snake.
Clarification about, I know you go on to it later about mistaken and wrong consciousnesses, because I think you just used mistaken and you'd used wrong before, so I was just trying to clarify, is perceiving the rope as a snake, is it a wrong consciousness or a mistaken?
Whatever is a wrong consciousness is necessarily mistaken consciousness. Whatever is a mistaken consciousness is not necessarily a wrong consciousness. Because mistaken just means mistaken with regard to the appearance. Wrong means wrong with regard to the main object, right? But it's wrong because it appears wrongly and is wrongly apprehended. In the case where you have a mind that is only mistaken, for instance, my eye consciousness perceiving the table. The appearance is that the table appears to exist objectively. Okay? Therefore, it appears in a mistaken fashion. It's mistaken. But it's not mistaken with regard to the object, the table itself. It recognizes a table. So it doesn't perceive that. It doesn't actively apprehend the table to be inherently existent. It doesn't do that. It only appears. Does that make sense? It only appears. So the mind doesn't actively apprehend the table to be inherently existent. Does that make sense? So there's a difference. Again, with the eye consciousness, the mirror image. The mirror image appears to be the face, but the mind doesn't actively apprehend it that way. Versus a mind where you do both. The mind is basically fooled by the appearance. It appears inherently, and therefore the mind it appears to be an actual face, and the mind also actively holds on to it being, or apprehends it being an actual face. So there's a difference between the two, right? Only the appearance is mistaken, but what you perceive exists. Or the appearance is unrealistic, doesn't exist, and what you apprehend also doesn't exist. Do you know the difference between the two? So whatever is a wrong consciousness must be mistaken, but what is mistaken doesn't have to be wrong. our minds, from a Buddhist point of view, are mistaken. Sorry, every single one. But they're not all wrong. Because of our appearance of inherent existence, to every mind that we have right now, phenomena appear as inherently existent. To every single mind, it appears. So all our minds are mistaken. But they're not wrong. Because we can perceive table. When it is a table, we perceive colors, blue, etc. So only with regard to the appearance, the mind so with regard to the appearance, it's mistaken, but not with regard to the main object. Therefore, we can say it's a correct mind and only mistaken. Correct? So this is just how the words are used. Of course, in day-to-day life, we say correct, non-mistaken, wrong, mistaken. Here in Tibetan, you do the same. Lopa means wrong. Lodok means wrong mind. Or Lodok means, wrong consciousness. And then Tushe means mistaken consciousness. Right? And those are not used, they're not synonyms, but rather used the way I've said in English. Wrong consciousness and mistaken, or just mistaken, not wrong. Just memorize it. Correct would be an eye consciousness perceiving a table.
So correct is mistaken.
Yes, it is correct because the table that it perceives is a table, but it's mistaken because it's mistaken with regard to the appearance. So being correct or not, you check whether that which it apprehends exists. Being mistaken or not, you check whether whatever appears is correct or not, or whatever appears is in accordance with reality or not. Now, the vase appears, the table appears. With regard to just the vase's appearance, the mind is not mistaken, but it's mistaken because the vase appears as existing in and of itself. And that is the mistaken aspect. So that is present in every mind, from a Buddhist point of view. That's why it's so difficult to realize emptiness. If we had a few minds that didn't have that appearance, we can focus on those minds, how objects appear to that mind, and things would make much more sense. Right? So, what can I say about that? That is initially not something you can go, wait a minute, is that true? Oh yeah, it's true. We don't realize. But actually, we do after a while. After a while, when you get used to that idea, this sense that I believe that things are out there, and I just happen to walk into the room and they have always been there. I mean, in the sense that this object is blue in and of itself that I have, it comes from my eye consciousness. It's because of that appearance. Does that make sense? To some extent. Wow. It's difficult.
The last part about the blue in the eye?
Oh, the last part, the blue in the eye?
Yeah,
oh, I said, we may not believe that inherent existence appears. We may not believe that. But, as I said, inherent existence means objective existence. So, do you get a sense that to your eye consciousness, the things around you appear as if they are like that, and I'm just seeing them that way? Well, that is because of the appearance of objective existence. That's because of it. So in that way, if you check your own mind, and there's a sense, yes, it appears to be over there, and I just happen to see it, that's because it appears to be objectively existent. Now, then if you analyze, can the object really exist that way? You come to see it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Things cannot exist in that way. It'd be absolutely absurd if they existed that way. Can you wait? Yeah? Okay. In 3 minutes. Okay, let me just ask, because you do look more tired, you look a little bit more distracted, and I get that because it's full on. So, would you prefer to have a meditation at 5:30? Or would you like me to continue until 6? Okay, raise of hands. Raise of hands. Meditation. Can someone count? 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 16. Okay, continue until 6. That's the majority. Sorry. Maybe we'll do a meditation tomorrow then. Okay? We'll do a meditation tomorrow. Today I'll continue a little bit on. We will go have some more question and answer. You'll definitely be able to ask your question and others too. In the meantime, let's take a break. This would be a good time, I believe. It's 43. So let's meet again 58. Oh, never mind. 5 o'clock. Take a bit of a break. Please keep the silence. And in the meantime, anyone who's got a question, you're welcome to come forward and I'll try to answer them. All right. Trying to think. Is everyone here? No, not yet. Okay, someone missing there. Someone missing there. Oh, you were there. Okay. All right. You moved. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yes, there's someone still missing. There. And then, okay. All right. Yes. Maya may not be coming back. Philippa may not be coming back. Okay. Because I need to say something important that everyone needs to hear, so this is why I'm waiting.
Maybe I
they're
just
there.
Ring one more time.
I mean, I can say it twice, but...
Maybe I'm not a good gong ringer.
Oh, no, this is bad.
Excuse me.
Sounded like you were doing your dishes outside. Sounded like you were doing your dishes outside. I'm kidding.
Well, it worked.
It worked. Some people came, yeah. Even Philippa came from somewhere far away. There you go.
There's a small gong, by the way, inside. We have one, a tiny one, that maybe we can use it for the...
Can we use that? It's not too distracting. Otherwise, all the people from the other place come.
Yeah, it sounds
well, it's really not loud. I can bring it in here, so...
Thank you. That'd be great. Oh, no, everyone has a watch, yeah. Okay. Great. Someone just left again. Oh, that was Philippa. Okay. Okay, great. Laughing is good, actually. So it's good. You're laughing. You're pardon?
The introductory course will be so confused.
At least we're not the only ones being confused with this topic.
I'm going to leave it here for...
Great. Yes, it's right there. It's over there. Great. Wonderful. Okay. Okay. Now, someone has, and it makes total sense. I had the same feeling. So, some people just came forward and said, "Can we leave those so-called clarifications?" It's really disruptive, and it is difficult as it is. And when there are more and more questions coming, and I can't help it, I go off. That's definitely my problem. So the suggestion was not to take any questions and to leave it to the question and answer period. So let's try that. Okay, fair enough. Let's give it a try. I am amazed at how many questions come in. It's great. It shows you really thinking about the material. But I also know I'm really stretching it. I mean, you're really exhausted. You must get exhausted. It's much easier to talk for that long than to listen to one person for that long. I know. So it's amazing what you're doing. And I'm trying to watch each one of you. And when I see the first people kind of almost collapsing, trying to... So be pretty obvious, please, with your exhaustion. So I can stop myself.
Not only you and the teachings, is also being in a different environment, sleeping in a dorm, not sleeping well.
Yes, not sleeping well. Of course, there are a lot of factors. So hardships are good.
I'm not complaining.
I know. No, but just think it's a challenge. It's good. Okay, all right. But it is, yes, it definitely is not easy. It's going to be 11...
You can keep your back.
I can do... Oh, thank you. Oh, that's nice. Thank you. It's going to be 11 days that are not easy. But it's a bit like exercises, you know. If you go to a sports camp and the exercise you do is you lift up this and you go like that for about a week. You will not even break a sweat. Versus if you really pick up the hard things and, you know, your body's really well trained. So the good thing is all these hardships will have a special effect on your mind. And you enjoy when it's over even more. Okay, great. Okay. There's someone coming. I can see his shadow.
Maybe it's someone.
Okay. All right. Anyway, so therefore, please allow for those questions. Just let go for a moment. Note those questions, write them down, and we'll try it this way. Great. Okay, so I'll say a little bit more, and very soon we have question and answers anyway. And there's already one question here on the table, so you could add, of course, your questions if you like later on. That's possible. Okay. Now, this category from the point of view of the object of engagement. Okay, so it's basically we say wrong consciousness, that we check whether something is a wrong consciousness or not based on the object of engagement. An ear consciousness, for instance, that apprehends the sound of a waterfall is a correct consciousness, because the sound of the waterfall exists and the consciousness therefore apprehends it correctly. If an ear consciousness, on the other hand, apprehends the sound of the waterfall to be the sound of wind, it is a wrong consciousness, because the sound of the waterfall being the sound of wind doesn't exist. Okay. Similarly, all afflictions, all afflictive emotions, and now we're getting to anger, etc., they're all, so ignorance, attachment, anger, they're all wrong consciousnesses because their objects of engagement are non-existent. So we don't need to worry about wrong consciousness perceiving a cow flying in the sky. Come on, how bad can that get? Well, potentially all wrong consciousnesses can be potentially dangerous. Perceiving a red traffic light as green, very dangerous. Perceiving the ground in front of you that's covered in glass shards, you call them glass shards? Perceiving that ground to be clean, potentially very dangerous. Perceiving this road to be without potholes when it has potholes, potentially dangerous. You can injure yourself. But those are sense consciousnesses that are wrong consciousnesses. They're not as bad as mental consciousnesses, like mental awarenesses. We've already heard so much about them, sense versus mental. So afflictive emotions, certain emotional states. So emotions in Buddhism are usually minds that wish for something versus just perceiving something. Wishing kinds of mind. Wishing to be with someone. Wishing to be separated from someone. Wishing from someone to be happy. Wishing for someone to be free from suffering. Which emotions did I just describe? Attachment, anger, love, and compassion. Right? Wishing to not be separated from someone because we feel we can't be without them. Attachment. Wishing for someone to be harmed. Aversion, anger. Wishing for them to be happy. Love. Wishing for them to be free from suffering. Very good, great. We can all identify. So there are wishing types of minds. You wish for something. So emotions. In English, the word emotions, it's really difficult to define. Anyway, but we kind of know when it comes from deep within, right? When it kind of rises from deep within, and it comes with a certain association, we usually call it an emotion, right? It comes along with like feeling good or not feeling good, right? If it makes us feel really miserable, we definitely call it an emotion. So anger would be an emotion which doesn't make us feel good. Hatred doesn't make us feel good. It feels we're all over the place when it arises, right? Attachment comes along with fear. Fear of not getting what we're attached to, or when we get it, fear of losing it. So those are kind of, again, an uncomfortable feeling. Fear is not a comfortable feeling. It comes along with those. So anyway, Buddhism is all about emotions. So Bao would kind of address that in a way when you ask about the robot, right, and the emotions. And I hope I'm addressing his question fully at some point about the robot and feelings and emotions. Very important in Buddhism. Very important. So these emotional states, such as wishing for someone to be happy, love, and so forth, those are seen as constructive. Those are good emotional states. They help us. They help us to act in a proper way, to give us happiness and peace of mind. The negative ones, those are the ones we want to remove. So we do recognize, we had this discussion over lunch, Droma and I and some other people, about the sense that, or Maya also, you participated, so about, for instance, some people think emotions are bad. So emotions in general, because they disrupt us, etc. But actually the emotions that people identify as bad are those negative ones. Now some people think love is a bad emotion. No, there's no problem with love. But our problem is that love and attachment are mixed. And we cannot differentiate them. Love is the thought, may someone else be happy. Okay? That is love. But when we are with another person, we do have attachment for them. It's very difficult to be free from attachment. So at times we just want them to be happy. At times we want them to make me happy. Okay? So let me give you a good example. Like when we're jealous, like really jealous, when my partner is looking at another person and I feel jealous. Okay? If I had only love for that person, right? If I'm, or if one of you has a relationship and you're in love with someone, if you really want that person to be happy, let them be with that person. It's going to make them happy. Rejoice. Okay? I gave them something, great, for some time, but this person gives them more. How nice for them. You all get that. You all get... No. The reason we cannot let go is because there's the attachment. They can make me happy. I want them to not leave me because I need them. So we have moments when, let's say, the person we love gets the job they wished to get. And we're like so happy for them. Right? We're so happy for them. We're happy for them, we wish them to be happy, and they achieve that. As long as we're not involved, as long as my own happiness is in no way compromised, I'm totally happy about it. If it means they move to Dubai, things may be different. Right? So you know what I mean? So as long as the attachment to the self and to my own happiness as being more important than others is in no way involved, as it's not threatened, I can do anything for that person. So this is where love comes in. But when the happiness of the other person may compromise my own, then things are a little harder. Right? Things are a little harder. Okay? Parents, I mean, their love for their children, there's also attachment there, but as His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, there is meditative love and there's biological love. Biological love and meditative love. All of us have a certain degree of love. Biological means like a natural love. Despite our self-grasping, our self-centeredness, we all experience love to a certain degree because it's the natural state of our mind. We have it to a certain degree. And the greatest love, this biological, like this as humans, as limited humans, the greatest love is the love of parents. The love of parents. I'm not saying every parent is the greatest person. Not every, of course, there are exceptions. But in general, the love of parents for their children, especially when they're very young, how much they give up, etc., it's truly amazing. And our parents love us our whole life, even if we turn into serial killers. You probably end up being the only one that visits you in prison or your parents. Probably, not in all cases. Okay? So therefore, this is an incredible love where, of course, there's attachment there too. I had to do ballet when I was a kid, and I was so bad in ballet. But my mom wanted to do it, so I had to go ballet. I always had to dance in the back. I was a star once in the very back because I was so bad in ballet. So this was my mom's attachment. She made me do this, what I hated. I only liked the tutu, but I hated the rest. So, right? There's attachment. In that case, she forced me until I was 12, and then I put my foot down from 5 to 12. Wow. It was torture. Wow. And I never got any better. So, of course, there was attachment there. There was attachment there. I still got these photographs. Oh my God. Never mind. I got a video of myself as a snowflake. All the other snowflakes were long gone. Running after the other snowflakes. So anyway, that's my ballet career. So my mom now sees it. It was out of her attachment that she made her go because she couldn't get ballet lessons. But I'm saying, but the rest of it, amazing. She drove me to the ballet every time. We had to take the bus not very often. So okay. Anyway, the point and what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that with regard to love and compassion, with regard to love and attachment, they're mixed. Okay? So, therefore, love is a kind of emotion that is very beneficial. It's very powerful, very healthy. Good mentally, good physically. So those are the emotions we need. So do not get the sense no emotions. These emotions are good. Okay? All right. And we may sometimes think that of anger could be better to solve a problem, but it exhausts us. Love gives us a strength that is inexhaustible. Inexhaustible? Yeah. His Holiness the Dalai Lama is such a good example. He's got so much love, and he hardly ever gets tired. Incredible energy. When His Holiness was younger, the people around him took shifts to look after His Holiness. Literally, took shifts. Because he had this incredible... shows the power of love. It's not just a stupid term that people sing about all the time. No, it's stupid as in like a cliche. No, it's really true. The power of anger, the power of love, love is very powerful. So it's a very important emotion that is stressed a lot. Not because there's someone saying it's good and so Buddha said so. No, because it's so good for us. To be happy. The more love you have, the happier you are. That's it. The more anger you have, the more unhappy, the more frustrated you are. It's as simple as that. So what is healthy? Love. Therefore, there are these emotions. So if you want to know what Buddhism is all about, what is the essence of Buddhism? Is removing disruptive emotions and replacing them with positive ones. That's Buddhism. Buddhism in a nutshell. So whether you're doing Buddhist practice or not, check. If you're meditating, the guy next to me is making a funny noise. You're meditating on anger, right? You're actually increasing your anger. You're not doing Buddhist practice. So all the external emotions that we go through, if they're not done with the right mind, they're not Buddhist practice. Buddhist practice, by definition, is removing afflictive emotions or disruptive emotions, negative emotions, and replacing them with positive ones. That's it. That's how you can define Buddhism. Nothing more. That's why our teachers used to remind us, okay, you say you're doing practice. Now tell me what you're doing. So when we describe it, and it doesn't, nothing of what I just said is part of the description, they say, are you doing that? Our teachers would always say, are you doing that? Are you actually working on your... And when we say yes, they're saying, okay, continue what you're doing. When we say no, they're like, you're not doing dharma. That's not Buddhism. Reciting a mantra? Are you using the recitation of the mantra to remove your afflictive emotions and replace them with positive ones? No? Don't recite the mantra. Okay? So, therefore, that's what Buddhism is all about. This is why it's so important to understand this, and I put it at the beginning. All right. Now, what is the root of our emotion? So the root, why do we have anger? Why do we have attachment? Is our misapprehension of reality, ignorance. So we start with that. Okay, so we are not bad people as such. It's not like we like to be angry, etc. It's more we can't help it. We can't help it because of a very basic misapprehension. This needs to be understood. And once you have that misapprehension, it's like adding fuel to fire, it's going to blow up. You're adding all the conditions for anger to be there. So the misapprehension is the root. All right. So from a Buddhist perspective, it's considered extremely important to comprehend the nature of ignorance. For the ignorance that misperceives or misapprehends reality on the deepest level is explained to lie at the root of all other afflictions, afflictive emotions or afflictions, anger, attachment, arrogance, and so forth, and thereby of all problems and difficulties. Whatever sufferings, unhappiness, worry, and pain we experience can be traced back to this type of ignorance. It's to be seen, but that's the claim. In general, ignorance is a mental consciousness that is diametrically opposed to the way phenomena exist. Examples of ignorance are the ignorance that apprehends that which is impermanent to be permanent, the ignorance that apprehends that which is in the nature of suffering to be in the nature of suffering, the ignorance that...
Happiness.
Oh, sorry. At least you're paying attention, Frank. Which is the nature of suffering to be in the nature of happiness, the ignorance that apprehends that which does not exist intrinsically to exist intrinsically, and so forth. So even the first ones, that which is impermanent, relationships are impermanent. They won't always be the same. Happy situations in life, don't get too excited, they're impermanent. Okay? So when I first came to Buddhism, my teacher called me an emotional yo-yo. And I thought the Tibetans, they were all like refrigerators, ice boxes. They never reacted in the same way. Something great happened, and I was like, wow! That is actually an expression of a sense of permanence. It's going to last. But the moment something great happens, it's already out of the way. It's already changing into something else. So my excitement implies that it's holding. It's like a sense of enthusiasm, and it's kind of out of proportion because I have a sense it lasts. Now, I'm not saying don't be happy about things, but there's a certain level, understanding, enjoy it for as long as it lasts. Don't hold on to it. The more I'm excited about it, the more I'm trying to hold on to the situation, and that's not realistic. So to go with the flow, things are always changing. When a problem arises, why fall into a depression? The moment it arises, it's already changing to go out of existence and transform. So there really is no real reason in reality to be so depressed, because a problem arises, okay, I'll deal with it, and then sooner or later, even if the problem seems similar, I got used to it. Have you ever noticed? You're very depressed for one day about the issue. But usually, if you let it go, the next day you feel better. You can't stay in that state. Usually you have a certain degree of satisfaction. Sometimes it goes down and sometimes it goes up, but we come back to that, right? We kind of, what's the word? Jump back or...
Bounce back.
Bounce back, that's the word. Bounce back. We bounce back. Bounce down. It's really up, we come down again, all right? So that's part of understanding impermanence. Enjoy it for as long as it lasts, but don't hold on to it unrealistically. Yes, it was great in the past, but that's in the past. Now it's different. So that is our perception of something being impermanent, perceiving it as permanent, can potentially cause us a lot of suffering because we try to hold on to it and you just cannot. All right, and then perceiving that which is the nature of suffering to be in the nature of happiness, if I believe that a relationship can give me everlasting happiness, nope, sorry. It lasts, like I told you, you're in love and everything is wonderful, and then work starts. Because they're my afflictive emotions and the other person's afflictive emotions. Now you need to deal with both of them. Right? Plus you're celibate plus one. Can't just go, oh, that one I got tired of, next one. I mean, you can, but it doesn't solve the problem. You know what I mean? So it's like, we perceive sometimes objects as being in the nature. If I just had that, I would be happy. Happiness comes from within. These external factors can give you a temporary satisfaction. But as long as you don't have true happiness from within, no way you experience lasting happiness. In fact, with the self-grasping, there's always a degree of unhappiness. What we believe is happiness is not real happiness. Because our self-grasping is in the way. And our happiness, what we experience as happiness, is just the temporary stoppage of something worse. Right? It's like when it's cold all the time, it's minus 10 degrees, and today it's minus 5. Oh, it's so warm. No, it's just in relation to something worse that I experience it as that blissful. But that's still cold, as an analogy, right? We have no idea what it feels like of that self-grasping, that sense that of imminent worry, like we're always kind of worried, like of this self, that it may be at some point injured, etc. So this is always in the back of our mind. Therefore, we can never be totally blissful and happy as long as the self-grasping is there. We just cannot. Freedom can only arise, and that means total peace of mind, no longer any worry and so forth, when we understand that self doesn't exist. So right now, what we experience is minus 10 and minus 5 every now and then, and we think, oh, that's a heat wave. That's pure happiness. No, it's better than minus 10. Okay? That's the greatest happiness we know. But of course, unfortunately, there's no one coming along and saying, take a taste of nirvana. You like it? Work towards that. That doesn't happen. Not like in a supermarket. They want you to buy a piece of cheese and they give you something to try, and then you still need to buy it. But they do. You see, the lamas, through their blessing, can sometimes trigger something in us. I compare that, and people say they have these experiences. They're in the proximity of a lama, and they experience this sense of bliss and satisfaction. That's a bit like giving you the cheese in the supermarket, and you still have to buy it. Because that wears off, that feeling of bliss. You only have the memory of that, and you still need to work and do all the work towards it. But you get your mind sometimes arises in a way in which it has never arisen, and that triggers your motivation to work towards that experience again. And in that way you move towards spiritual, you travel a spiritual path. Okay? So, but anyway, usually perceive that which is really in the nature of suffering to be in the nature of happiness. And of course, in her intrinsic existence, that misapprehension is the real culprit, that misapprehension. Okay, I'll go through one more and then we'll have questions. Then the next is attachment. From that misperception, in particular with regard to the I, that gives rise to attachment. So one of the afflictions that are induced by ignorance is attachment. It focuses on an object we consider to be a source of pleasure, such as another person, and either exaggerates the person's positive qualities or superimposes positive qualities the person does not possess. Sounds familiar? Right? We're infatuated by someone. So we see positive, we only focus on the positive, and we think, maybe he or she is also like that. And then because it makes us feel good, we choose to believe it. Okay. So, while apprehending those qualities, attachment craves for and becomes attached to the person. Since the object of engagement, of attachment, is the exaggerated or superimposed qualities of the person, and since these positive qualities do not accord with reality, attachment is a wrong consciousness. Right? You see them as such great, oh my God, like in and of itself. It totally exaggerates what's there. It totally exaggerates. And it's very important to identify this because this governs your actions. It's so strong, our rational mind cannot go up against it for a while until the attachment takes over. So to recognize how it works, recognize it's not found, really analyze, is the person really like that? Look at the negative qualities. Okay? Depending on how strong our attachment is. The stronger it is, the more you suffer. Period. Really, it's like that. We all know, the stronger our attachment, the stronger our obsession, the more we suffer. Does that make sense? So to really check and use, so that's what we do in meditation. How does the person really exist? The thing is with the attachment also, we are not attached to the qualities, we're attached to the person. So we superimpose the qualities to such a degree that the person becomes those qualities. But the person and the qualities are separate. We say the qualities of the person. And still it feels as if there were one. Okay? So that's a very tricky mind. And it's actually the attachment only sets in because first there's the misperception of this exaggeration. That's called the exaggerating attitude. And that then, so first there's the misapprehension. This person is in and of him or herself, great. We label. Why do we label? They make us feel good. So the good feeling is here. The good feeling comes from the mind. But because of this good feeling, we label this person someone who gives me happiness. And suddenly it feels as if the happiness is within that person. I can only be happy if I'm with that person. Okay? Which is also not true, because before we met them, we were happy many times. But now we believe this happiness, which is actually here, is found in that person. It's from there, over there. And that's this greatness. And I want to be near it. I want to control it. Attachment comes for the need to control. The stronger your attachment, the more you want to control the situation, the other person possibly. Okay? All right. So it can only, the way I describe it, you can all get that it leads to suffering. And this object does not exist. Your mind exaggerates. Okay? Does that make sense? So I usually give this example because it's funny. So I tell you this. When I was 16, I had a crush on one of my classmates. Okay? So I had such a crush on him, and he wasn't interested. So it was just like a girl crush, and I couldn't even talk to him. So we never really got to know each other. But when I saw him, I even thought his backpack was beautiful. You know, we carry these backpacks. We no longer carry these little satchels, like, you know, that was not very fashionable. So we had backpacks, and like his backpack, it was part of him. So I saw that, and I always felt happy. And then he went to the US for some exchange program, and he was gone for a year. And I'd forgotten about him. And when he came back, I was thinking, what did I see in him? Right? My infatuation with him, this attachment, this craving, it suggested all these bizarre ideas, like these bizarre things I saw in him. And when that emotion was gone, I was like, where does that come from? I mean, his backpack, I don't even remember his backpack, but I mean, that was certainly not triggering anything. And he didn't either. So then, now thinking back, for me that's a good example of how I looked at this person, how I saw this person out of this attachment versus when that has disappeared. I saw them quite differently. So my perception of this person was not in accordance with reality. And of course I suffered. Unrealistic, I suffered a lot. Right? Okay, great. Does that make sense? Now we have time for questions. 15 minutes. Sorry, it's not that long.
I think you have one more.
I do, but that doesn't relate to the topic. Well, if the mind has been here since beginningless time, then all possible situations must have occurred. Yeah. Therefore, why we're not enlightened? Well, that wish is the only thing that hasn't occurred. We never had the wish to become enlightened. Somehow our attachment has been so strong. Yes, that's a very typical question. Actually, some of the great masters, Nagarjuna and so forth, they address it. Maitreya, etc., they address it. Why we're not yet enlightened? Well, because so far our attachment to our samsara has been too strong. So we never really developed a wish to get out of it and work accordingly. Yeah. Anyway, go on. More questions? Yes, no.
That was the one that I wanted to ask before.
Yes,
actually,
please.
in a way, related to that question in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
Not why we're not enlightened, but the fact that when we were talking about I consciousness see something and then it's related with the mind. So I was wondering, regarding the karma, where that related, or like imprints that we have, right? So, for instance, when we have this feeling, I mean, we can debate about it, of course, and then give up. Like when you know someone, is that related also? You see him, but there is a feeling that you know him. Not like the first. Even regardless to, I was wondering if that could be something that we can relate to that in that regard. Or for instance, there was a mantra that I heard for the first time in my life, and I felt like it resonated with me really strongly. So I was wondering if that could be something that in a way could relate to that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why mantras, when we use mantras, that has an effect that could be very profound as well in that regard. It's so ancient, and perhaps we've heard it. I don't know, I'm kind of like trying to think. Because that for me was something very significant.
Okay. Well, what you seem to address, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this idea, we meet people, for instance, and we feel we know them. Have you had that experience? Or you meet someone and you don't know why you don't like them. I once had that with a nun. I was scared of her. Not only did I dislike her, she terrified me. I'm not going to tell you who it was. No one who's presently here on this compound, so don't worry, no one here. No, someone I haven't met for years, when I was the first nun. So I thought, wow, it doesn't have any, where does that come from? Anyway, now learning about, of course, past and future lives and karma, we meet the same people over and over again. Like, we meet people over. Sometimes we have a karma to be with the same person over many lifetimes. Which is why I say jokingly, but I mean it. There is no love on first sight. We probably were with that person before. We saw them before. We spent time together. So when people have this experience of like, they meet someone and they know they're going to marry them. Have you ever heard that? Like, where does that come from? Why this person? You have no logical explanation for that. But from a Buddhist point of view, you probably were married with them. And so there is some residue that was left in the mind from that, what we call imprint, and you're just kind of recognizing them again. And in the case of this nun, maybe I'd done something to her in the past, and we had some past in the previous life, both choosing to be nuns. Maybe I was that dog in the monastery that bit her as a monk in the monastery, right? And so I was scared of her. Who knows? But we had maybe some history. It doesn't have to be. Maybe she reminded me of someone. That's also possible. Not saying in all cases that's true. But oftentimes, there's a familiarity. A lot of people say that when they meet their lama. Like Geshema Densen Pamo, when she met her lama, there was a very strong response that she felt like she'd come home, she met that person again. And the lama said, well, we've been connected for many lifetimes, right? So therefore, we have these connections with people, and sometimes we just continue from where we, what's the word for that? Where we left off. We just continue, we go on from there. But of course it doesn't always continue like that. At some point we may move in a different direction. That's also possible. So now with regard to your question with regard to mantras, if there is a certain mantra that resonates with you, well, it's possible, of course, that you did practice with this, you did that practice in a previous life, and there's a sense of familiarity. And more than that, it triggers something in you that's like a positive feeling, and you want to recite it more often. How mantras really work, I mean, that is difficult to understand. There is definitely a blessing. There's something not intrinsically existent in that, but there's definitely on a conventional basis, those sounds, they resonate. I mean, they have a certain effect on our body. They were set forth, these sounds were set forth by the Buddha and other great beings because of their insight to the effect of sounds on us. For instance, that may be one reason. Even those paintings around us, they have these colors because these colors trigger something in us. Again, certain shapes. So the Buddha himself has given the measurements of a Buddha statue, saying this is how it should look, because it's actually just symbolic, but it affects our mind in a certain way. It affects our mind in a positive way. So those are only methods, they're only tools. But if they affect our mind in a positive way, we may as well use them. So you may wonder, for instance, when you walk into a Tibetan temple, for our liking, it's a little full. We would not decorate our living room like that, let's put it that way. We certainly wouldn't use those colors. Okay? Now that's a different matter. You don't get IKEA kind of living rooms that look like that, for instance. But that's the reason they look like that, for several reasons, and this is just me saying it, that's my theory on it. Well, first of all, colors trigger something in us. The brighter the color, they do trigger something in us. So white being associated with peace, for instance. So this is also like that. It's the same in Buddhism. Red with forcefulness, etc. So forcefulness. Some of the Buddhas, they manifest in a forceful way. Forceful compassion, which doesn't mean harmful compassion, but like, stop it, right here, you're harming yourself kind of compassion. So that is expressed in those drawings. They're just highly symbolic, triggering something in us. And when you walk into a temple and you're surrounded by these holy images, it's kind of like, I hate my neighbor, oh my God, everyone's watching me. Kind of like, you kind of put into this intense spiritual environment, and it has an effect at some point. If you religiously act or spiritually active, it affects your mind, and your mind goes into that spiritual mode, if you like. That's why they burn incense. For instance, every time you do your practice, you burn incense. You don't do it usually, but when you do your practice, you burn incense. That's what many people do. So the moment you put on the incense stick, your mind adopts a certain space, because the smell now triggers that. So initially, it was like the mental consciousness meditating, smell at the same time you smell that. So you bring the two together. You associate the smell and the spiritual practice. You bring the two together mentally. Then when you smell it, it triggers that, and your mind becomes naturally calm. That's why you use that as a means to become calm. Someone mentioned, for instance, smelling a shirt and being reminded of home. Well, a certain smell, like a certain washing powder, right, that maybe your mom uses. Well, home means protection. Home means love. For many people, not for everyone, but usually it means where you're comfortable, where you can be yourself, where you're loved for who you are. And those smells, because you smell that and you experience that, the mental consciousness brings the two together. And when you then smell it, that feeling of being protected comes back. So this is using smell in a way where certain associations come through. You use sight to lead to certain association. That is Buddhist psychology. It's not important that you have these pictures around you, but it triggers something in you. It has an effect on your mind. Mantras do too. Mantras also, it's like the repetitive nature of it. Your mind goes into some kind of, it calms your mind. It's repetitiveness. I think also, like, I'm wondering sometimes when with certain diseases, children like to, right, with autism, it probably calms their mind, like this repetitiveness. So this has a calming effect. Or when you kind of, I know I've seen Tibetan, Indian mothers on the train. They do like this on their head all the time. It's really interesting. I first thought, that doesn't feel nice. I mean, but then I thought, no, it's probably this repetitiveness, right? Again and again. They have their child here and they just tap the forehead. And it has a calming effect, just that repetitiveness. Right? So, I don't know why the forehead, but maybe, yeah, it's just nice to have some hand here, and if it's repetitive, it calms the child. So, mantras may have that same effect, like reciting those. And if you have done that practice before, maybe that particular mantra, then there's also that sense of familiarity that you cannot explain because we don't remember our past lives. Okay? Does that make sense? All right. Yes, Bao.
Yeah, so the characterization of attachment, standard characterization in psychology or behavioral sciences and cognitive sciences is very different from how it is characterized here.
Yes.
But anyway,
it's actually something positive. It's a kind of bonding. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, two quick questions regarding attachment.
Yes.
The first one is there a term
yes.
Where, for mental state, wherein there is no exaggeration of a person's positive qualities?
Yes.
Where there is no controlling present?
Yes.
And the qualities that we accord to that person
yes.
are in accordance with reality.
Yes, there is.
The second question is, now,
can we just take this question because I'm just looking at my watch? So sorry. So I just answered this question, and please hold the next one. Yes, there is. Now, attachment. I know that attachment in the West is something positive. It's the bonding, for instance, between mother and child. Now, here we're actually borrowing this word and using it in a negative sense. This does not make the bonding, that in the way in which you described in modern psychology, is not positive. It's very positive. It's just using the word differently. And what you describe is described in Buddhism as affectionate love. As affection. You feel close to someone. There's a feeling of seeing them as endearing and positive based on reality. There's a difference between love, wishing someone to be happy. We distinguish between that love, which is just called love, as opposed to affectionate love or affection. That is not, the mind does not think, may that person be happy. If it thinks that, it's no longer called affection. It's a kind of mind where you feel a sense of closeness towards that person and find them endearing, lovable. Right? You see them as positive. You see their positive qualities, which is realistic, and kind of just feel that sense of endearment. That's called affectionate love. So yes, and it's just we use that term differently. Okay? All right. So, sorry, because it is 5:45. Yesterday we didn't do a dedication. Today I would like to do it. Did we do a dedication? No, we didn't. All right. I would like to just do a dedication. Just take a moment. And of course, with Venerable Droma, you do it again in the meditation. But just take...
If I remember.
Okay. So, and you explain purification, please. Yeah, I still didn't get to do it. All right. So, take a moment to just focus whatever positive potential, whatever hardship we've gone through, you've gone through.
So till 6,
We have till 6?
Yes. Yes.
Stop dedicating.
Are you going to do a 15-minute dedication?
No. Sorry, I got confused with 5:45 versus 6. Forget it, whatever I said. Bow, go, you second. Second.
Okay, so if I ought not to get myself attached to anything or anybody, because that thing is impermanent, now here is my issue with this. The first point is, there does not seem to be a necessary connection between attachment, whichever way it is defined, and any entities being permanent or impermanent. There does not seem to be a necessary connection.
Good.
Insofar as there is a connection, that connection is imposed, or so it seems, by us based on our faulty understanding and faulty experiences with this thing called attachment. That's the first issue I have. The second issue is, how do we know for sure that there is no positive value whatsoever in the suffering that results from attachment?
Okay, good. All right. Good question. Important question. So, first of all, there doesn't seem to be an obvious connection between ignorance giving rise to attachment. Okay? All right. Now, it's not obvious right now because of how I explained. Ignorance was so general. Okay. So, the way... And it's a little complicated how it takes place. Basically, how it takes place is, first of all, I have a sense I'm here and you are there. Okay? So, not only merely conventionally in relation to me, this is I, in relation to you, you're other. No, in relation to you, you are I, doesn't occur to me. To my mind, to my more emotional, innate mind, it seems I'm I and everything revolves around me. That's how it seems. So not only that, I'm more important than you are. Since my mind desires happiness, my happiness is more important than yours. That's the basic, the feeling we have. Not necessarily a rational thought. It comes from deep within. Somehow my happiness, when it comes to my survival, when it comes to my family, to my this, my that, they're more important. Okay, that comes out of this misperception, believing I'm intrinsically I, and my happiness, it's not just I is not just mine is not just a convention, and my happiness is not just a convention, and the importance of that is not just, no, it intrinsically is so. This is the right way. So out of that, now, my happiness is my happiness is the most important thing, and now I'm searching for it. I don't find it within. Why? Because of my attachment to the self, because of my grasping, I don't really find that inner peace that I'm craving. So where am I looking? Outside. I feel incomplete. I feel I'm lacking. So this is the lack of satisfaction, which is, in other words, a sense I'm lacking. I need this, I need that to be happy. Of course, I'm lacking things. That's true. I cannot feel full happiness, but only because of my misperception. That's in the way. But as long as I don't really understand that deeply, I'm looking for happiness outside of myself. So, where do I try to find it? In external situations. Now, there's a sense that this object, there's an object over there. Not only do I feel inherently I'm I and you inherently other. Inherently, my happiness is more important and yours is less so. But also I'm thinking that the moment you trigger some happiness within me, there's something intrinsic in you that can give me happiness. And there's a sense that you can give me lasting happiness on top of that. So my sense that there's something inherent in you that can actually give me this happiness, it also gives rise to a sense that you can give me some lasting happiness. All right? And therefore, now, although the happiness I experience is really just my mind, I believe that this happiness comes from you. You are giving me this happiness. And therefore, I want you to be close to me. I want you to always trigger that feeling within me. And if you don't always do that, I try to make sure you do it, so the controlling comes in. So therefore, in this sense, it's basically this it's clear that the root is really believing there's something from the side of the object, that you're intrinsically others, I'm inherently I'm inherently more important. It just is. And you are independent on what you give me. You are my friend, my enemy, or someone I don't care about. In fact, when we come into a room or when we're with people, very quickly we judge. Like, don't care. Like, don't care. My finger was just going randomly. I wasn't pointing at anything. Right? So we do that with other people, again in relation to ourselves. We're so accustomed to it. We're so accustomed, it's very quick. So you see, it is so everything we do is always in relation to my happiness. That's most important. So that attachment. Okay, that's the first question. And so we create, of course, it comes from our own mind, that misperception. And once it's there is automatically attachment. Why? Because attachment contains the sense that this person is inherently this, that, and the other. I'm inherently more important. You are inherently second class. And you're only inherently important to me if you give what this inherent I needs. Okay? Does that make sense? Now, with regard to your second question, the suffering that attachment gives rise to, why is that negative? Well, who wants to suffer? Do we like to suffer? You see, we only say that suffering is, that attachment is negative. We only say that in relation to what we want and what we don't want. Now, sorry, I'm reaching out here a little bit. I want to include this. This is an important aspect. One of my teachers, Geshema, again, the same person, one day he said to me, he asked me to translate, and without any warning, he said, there were other people, and he said, translate the following: the Buddha is bad, anger is good. I don't know what was going on. What? What did he say? Anyway, he said, just translate it. And I did. Buddha is bad, anger is good. And then he said, the Buddha is bad because the Buddha harms our suffering. Anger is good because it benefits our suffering. Then I got it. He's saying that what is it we really want? We want long-term happiness. So if anger and attachment don't provide us with long-term happiness, then in relation to that we say they're bad. Nothing good or bad about them in and of themselves. They're neutral. In and of themselves, no. In and of themselves, they're neither good nor bad. This is in and of itself neither short nor long. So attachment and anger are not good or bad. Neither. Love is not good or bad. But it is in relation to what it triggers in us, happiness or suffering, and in relation to what we want. If we all wanted to suffer, the Buddha would have said, work on your anger, work on your attachment. Okay? Because that's what it gives rise to. Now, is the suffering that is created by attachment, can that not be good? Yes, of course. As long as we have it. We cannot wish it away. As long as we have attachment, we have certain types of sufferings. Now we can utilize those sufferings to bring happiness in the long term. We can utilize them. So we can use little sufferings. I mean, going to the dentist, you're accepting short-term suffering for long-term benefit. All right? So I'm not saying that every suffering is bad in general. So the suffering that is the result of attachment, as long as it's there, we might as well utilize it in a positive way. But we're actually doing that with the goal to grow and to remove suffering. So as long as it's there, we may utilize it. But if we can avoid it altogether, if there was a pill, all your suffering would be gone, right? And you rise with this great wisdom because there's nothing in the way now. There's wisdom, there's love. Who wouldn't want the pill? Because our suffering doesn't just come with suffering, it comes with restrictions, it comes with fears, it comes with limitations, it comes with the inability to love all sentient beings equally and a full acceptance of ourselves and others. So those are qualities, that's the side effect of the attachment, etc. Not only does it bring suffering, it limits us in such a profound way. So therefore, if we can be free from those limitations, that causes so many problems. And maybe the problems in this life are limited. But maybe it gets worse in the next life. How do we know? It could get worse. Right? Be reborn in a place where we have no ability to control our anger, etc. Could happen. So then we're even worse off than we are today. Therefore, there's this whole emphasis on it's potentially dangerous. It could grow stronger. It could grow so strong that it gives rise to such anger and hatred that you may set out and kill a lot of people. Right? Being attached to a certain ethnicity, right? A certain, as Hitler did, I'm sorry for bringing him up again, but it's the ultimate, the worst serial killer of the previous century. So in this case, his attachment to a certain type of, I don't know, physical statute or what have you, gave rise to a dislike for those who didn't look like that, and it triggered this most horrific, the greatest genocide that in recorded history. Very dangerous if you allow that kind of attachment to grow to that extent. So even if it's not that strong, I don't know what's to be in the future. I don't know. It's too dangerous to leave it. It's like a time bomb. Therefore, I want to remove it. Yes, I can maybe learn from some of those things, but if I can remove it altogether, by understanding that its cause is my misapprehension of reality, of course I opt for that. But that takes some time because it's over years and years and years of familiarizing myself with the understanding of how my attachment, all my afflictive emotions can all be traced back to my misperception. And then it makes sense. I need to understand how things really exist. And then I pay attention to that. Okay, that was a little extensive, but I felt it was an important question, important that this be asked. I'm sure many of you wonder the same thing, so I'm glad he asked it. Now we can do it. Sorry, it was only one question we answered, but I hope I can address some of your doubts as well.
What is the Tibetan word for affectionate
Yongchamba. 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 That's affectionate love. Chamba is love, and Yongchamba is affectionate love. Okay. So let's now dedicate whatever virtue, whatever positive potential we have created together here through accepting all the hardships, physical as well as mental discomfort. Following a discipline that may be difficult, as a means to learn something about our own mind, about our psyche, about positive emotions versus negative ones, and so forth. May that become a cause for us to bring about these changes of reducing and eventually removing those negative emotions. And give rise to unconditional love, compassion, affection, and so forth. So that we ourselves find lasting inner peace and satisfaction. And due to the interdependence of all phenomena, are able to affect that also in others. So maybe become fully awakened to be able to take others, show others how to reach that state. Alright, have a nice evening, get a good rest, be quick with your dinner. No, just please go ahead, go out and queue for dinner to make sure you're there in time.